Alright, we're back with Guild Wars Tactics 14. We're going to talk about more strats, more leaks, because that's what we do with this series. We are going over the Ragnarok team today. These guys you are only going to see on defense. There's not really a strong Ragnarok offense team, I would say, as of currently. But at the core of the defense setup, you are going to see Ragnarok, Blessing of the Earth, Dian. Now, Dian is very crucial because what she does is a damage cap, as long as you have a relic. You're not going to run her if you don't have a relic. That's the whole point of Dian in the first place. So in PvP, Rag allies and the hero, damage taken from skills, during the enemy's turn will not exceed 50% of maximum HP, right? So that means at worst, everybody has to get 2-tapped. And because of this Ragnarok allies clause, it's best to have the entire team under the Ragnarok characteristic. You don't really want to tech in anything that's outside of Rag, otherwise this damage cap is not going to apply. Now her passive is also very strong in PvP, which again is going to apply to Guild Wars. Removes up to 3 buffs and debuffs on the enemy when the hero uses a skill. Increases damage dealt by 40% for each buff or debuff removed. Why is this so good? Well, no zombie melee strats, because that's just going to remove the resurrection buff. That's gone. Decent against angels. They like to stack up some buffs here and there. Who else likes to buff? I don't think offense demons really buff. Sins don't really buff. Their buffs just kind of happen. Maybe if they're running Green King, I think that had an attack-related buff, so that's something to keep note. Her damage does get increased by each buff and debuff removed. Doesn't really matter too much. Her damage isn't crazy. What's convenient is if you can get the attack seal, which doesn't happen too often. Her kit most of the time is just going to be a support role kit, so that's also why she's going to be on HP defense, right? Standard stuff there. So at the Dian, at the core of the team, what are we going to do for our other 3 options? So I would say this slot hasn't changed at all. Like, ever since this lady dropped. Oh, I got them all popped up right here. We got Wedding Brynn. Brynn. What does she do? She's going to drop a AoE. Not AoE. Where is it? Decrease all enemies' attack-related stats and defense-related stats by 15%. Okay? So that is a constant 2-piece debuff, I believe. And because of that, she is always going to have a priority on her weak point attack. So you're always going to see that come out first, which is why we want to keep her on the far left, because her single target is charged, very outdated ability, very not good. So we don't want that to pop up. We're going to let the weak point take priority, keep her on the far left, and because she is in a strong weak point attacker, she's going to be on a attack crit. Now, her rest of her passive is kind of mid, you know, boosts her basic stats per Ragnarok ally on the battlefield. There we are again with the Rag clause, very specific. And her relic is actually pretty good. Only 1 debuff on the hero can be applied, right? So she kind of ignores a big chunk of the kit that Light Bond humans or even Light Bond sins kind of utilize there, since she can only have 1 debuff. And her attack is increased by 20% when debuffed, which kind of almost always happens. She'll have that little boost to her her attack. So this last slot over on the far right, it's pretty much traditionally been Freya. Freya is also a very strong attacker. Her attacks are a little more not outdated, unlike you know, like that charge attack on Brynhild. We have a Flood single target, very strong. Pierce AoE, also very strong. And her passive increases her attack-related stats for every on the battlefield with the Ragnarok characteristic. So there's that Rag characteristic again. So everybody scales heavily based off Ragnarok allies, so we want to keep that up as much as possible. Increases allies' pierce rate by 4% for every debuff applied to the enemies. Another reason that we like to have that Winning Brynhild. Okay, you're going to have that 2-piece debuff on the enemies. So 2, 4, 6, 8, right off the bat, we're going to cap out on her pierce rate. So pierce rate's nice for her AoE. We keep her on the far right, that's going to pop off. Her relic obviously is for Nids, so that doesn't matter here. And then you're going to want this bad girl on attack crits. And if you want to go crazy, I think if you want to give her a specific link, she does have a pierce rate link with Blue King. So if you want to boost her pierce even further, you can do that. Dian, she could use Tarmiel. Tarmiel is pretty flexible link. Hauser is good also because he does have a plus 1440 to the HP. So I like to do either Angel links or basic stat links or combined attack links. So those are traditionally pretty strong. Brynn, I don't think has anything we really care about. She's got the stat stick of LR Liz. Resistance isn't too bad. Lifesteal on Bond also isn't terrible, but Nunchuck Bond has very terrible basic stats and CC to apply to Brynn. So I'd probably stick with either LR Liz if you don't have her link on anywhere else, or just, something really high CC, base stats, whatever. Now this last slot is super flexible, okay? This has kind of seen a lot of light. So in the olden times, this was Sigurd, and I'm sure he could still use them now. He's not the worst. So his whole thing is that when there is a stat decreasing effect on the enemy, you're going to get an attack buff, and it's going to stack up to 3 times. So because of Brynhild, right, you're going to see that stat decreasing effect on 4 enemies. So you're going to cap out with a 30% attack buff. So that's pretty big. You're going to hit, your opening hits are going to be massive, right? You're looking to kill. You're probably going to kill. His extort, pretty useless. What's nice about Brynn being alive is because of the stat decreasing debuff, this doesn't have any sort of priority at all unless Brynn dies. And the flood attack, or not flood, sorry, amplify goes crazy because he's always going to have 3 buffs, again, as long as Brynn is alive. So, he is an older option, but I think he is still a plenty viable option. The rest of our options, you could do Freya if you need a stat stick. He's not the worst, only if you have his relic, right? So applicable allies, basic stats increased by 5%, and damage dealt with single target attacks increased by 5% for every rag and unknown. So he's got a little more flexibility when it comes to his relic, but almost every relevant Ragnarok hero is in fact unknown. So Freya's not bad if you have his relic. Another one is Tyr. If you want to go Ooga Booga with your damage, right? Triple crazy DPS, you feel free to do so. This man is pretty flexible because, like I said, with his unknown claws and a similar passive to Brynn, people also tech him into normal unknown teams. Now you do have the added benefit of having a taunt, and enemies do have to be wary if they can't one-shot Tyr, right? Because based on diminished HP, his crit chance is going to increase, right? His crit damage is scaled based off of applicable allies, again, Ragnarok and Unknown, and what is he doing? Decreases all enemies' crit resistance by 40%. So if this man starts stacking crit chance because you failed to one-shot him on the first turn, he's probably going to crit. Some units, even through HP crit res, which, the attacking enemies are probably going to use. Sort of depends on the setup, sort of depends how low you end up getting Tyr in the first place. So, if he is on the enemy's Ragnarok team, I would recommend absolutely one-shotting him. He has a pure single target, and then AoE weak point, which is what's doing all that damage in the first place. So you do have a double weak point. They can fight for priority, but at the same time, this also means you're probably going to have an AoE weak point almost every turn, and that can be a serious struggle to deal with as the attacker. And the last real slot that this kind of goes to is Scotty. If you're looking to deal with Light Bond humans or Light Bond Sins, focuses on a lot of debuffs, that's something that this girl would really help out with because her passive decreases all enemies' attack and defense and increases ally skill damage dealt by 50% for each debuff on herself. Not to mention her own kit sort of gives herself debuffs by decreasing her maximum HP. So lots of debuffs, lots of extra damage dealt, lots of stats coming out that way. Not to mention if you are fighting against debuffs, like we said earlier, Brynn is always going to have this attack buff from her relic. So that's pretty much the full Ragnarok setup. This Merlin is pretty bad. I mean, double debuff is just honestly terrible. You already know Thonar's for dogs. Hell hasn't really seen a lot of play. Even in an unknown setup, she doesn't really bring anything in particular to a team. I know she looks good. I'm sure there's something that hasn't been cooked yet, but I haven't really seen Hell in anything outside of like a couple caveat test teams here and there, but nothing has truly sticked when it comes to Hell. Summer Freya is just a worse red Freya. Obviously, Yorm's for Deer, Megs are for the Beast Battle. I would argue that green Brynhild is also for Demonic Beast Battle. Ragbon, I guess, if you're looking for a super budget option, you have absolutely nothing to work with, because he is basically a better Death Pierce when it comes to his passive, increasing attack-related stats. So that could be useful. And Blue Lost Vein, again, we have a Lost Vein unit. If you want to get crazy with an Ult Rush offense strat, he would be your guy, but when it comes to defense, not so much. And then this last Rag unit, Thonar, what is this? Hell? Balmoth, right. So, Rag is obviously one of the newer characteristics, and it doesn't really have too many options, so that kind of solidifies you to a smaller amount of heroes to pick from. Which is also why the options have already been solidified for a while, so I think if you're wondering for this flex slot, the best option, like I said, is it might be a toss-up between Scotty and Tyr. I think these two you're probably going to see the most. Because Tyr is basically a win more unit, and then Scotty's sort of a I can fight everybody if I have this full debuff protection setup. So, whatever you choose, let's see if we have any relevant links for this version of the team. Nothing crazy on Bryn. I think we already checked her. Scotty does have an attack link with base melee, or Captain Melee, I should say, and then a defense link with Giant Dian. So her links are pretty decent. Go with whatever's going to give you more CC there. Or, like I said, Hauser can be replaced with Tarmiel. Oh, she has a Fat King as well, which is also 1440. So, whatever has more CC, go with that. I think my Green King might actually be better, so we'll keep that in mind. I don't think these guys want any particular Angels or Graces outside of the Red Tarm on Dian, so that's probably going to close things out there. Just in case we didn't fully check gears, attack crit on Bryn, HP defense on Dian, attack crit on Freya, and then your flex slot, if you're running Scotty, she's HP defense. If you're running Tyr, attack crit. Freya, if you're running him for the stat stick on the relic specifically, probably HP defense is better. Sigurd HP defense. If you have to do Bond HP defense, and then if you have to do Hell, again, also HP defense. Really, the attack crit just belongs to these two. Now, because half the team does have attack crit, the CC is sort of on the lower end, so that is something you are going to have to work with. The artifact set is going to be increasing basic stats of allies, the Ragnarok characteristic, by 3% for every debuff applied to the enemies. Limit 6 times. So this is a huge shout out again to Brin's kit and to Tyr's kit. So this is another reason why you might want to run Tyr, because of the debuff clause here. If you're doing double debuffs like that, if one dies, you're still going to get a decent benefit off of the artifact set because of the other being alive. So this can be pretty nasty, this setup. So that is going to be the actual comp. For the most part, the team is red. So if you are, buying your buffs and whatnot, like we mentioned before, double check with your guild, see if you have a CC threshold you need to meet by using HP buffs. And if you meet that threshold, then feel free to spam attack buffs. So I think, like I just said, every version of her is going to be, or not her, of the team is going to be red. The flex slots, Sigurd, Tyr, Scotty, and Freya. Yeah, they're all red, so triple red. That's going to help your CC a lot, like I mentioned, since it's going to be on the lower end with double attack gears, but that is going to be the Ragnarok setup. If you guys like it, drop a thumb, maybe sub for that, and I'll see you in the next one.